Hello everybody, I'm Diana. Welcome to Build a Quilt and this video all about how to create our 2024 holiday block called Peppermint Twist. That's right, it's our Quilt Lab block for November of 2024 and I put it out in November so that you have plenty of time to create the free quilt pattern that comes with it or any other design that you or any other project that you want to create with the block for this holiday season. This block can be made in any color variations that you like, blue, purple, orange, brown, green, whatever, but I made it specifically in the more traditional red and green Christmas colors. I could see it being done in beautiful blues for more of a Hanukkah theme. I could see it being done in all the colors that celebrate Kwanzaa. Any holiday, end of year holiday that you celebrate, you could substitute colors and still make a beautiful block. And I did call it Peppermint Twist, but I've seen peppermints in all kinds of colors, so it goes that way as well. But I hope you try it in its original form. And like I said, I kind of gave the bag away here. There is a free quilt pattern. We're going to go over all of that in this video. I'm about to introduce the block to you, but there is also the demonstration videos for the segments. There is a little segment on how to choose fabric colors if you're going to choose these original reds and greens that I've used. And that can also help you choosing other colors as well. You'll understand like depth of color for whatever color variation you might choose. And also, there is a layout video on how the single blocks get laid out. And then when we come back at the very end, I will talk about the free quilt pattern that comes with it because we've added some pieces to it that you don't normally get with your Build a Quilt. Normally, Build a Quilt Quilt Lab patterns of the month this year have come in 3 sizes. Well, this month, this block, the Peppermint Twist, is coming in 2 sizes, 9x9 and 12x12. But you're also going to get a set of sashing patterns for the quilt. And I'll go over all of that at the end. So are you ready to see the block? Here it is. Here is our Peppermint Twist block, our November 2024 Quilt Lab block. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you see the twist there in the pinwheel. And I just called it Peppermint Twist because I was thinking of that song that day and I was thinking of Christmas candies and peppermints came to mind and all of that. So I thought Peppermint Twist was a good name for this block. This is the 9x9 size. It will also have all of the digital files for you to make it in the 12x12 size as well. So let me just actually, instead of setting aside, let me put it back here so you can see it while I'm talking here a little bit. That'll be even better. Get my little magnets. I love these little magnets, but if you don't have a fingernail, they're hard to get a hold of because they're very thin. All right, so there is our block. Let's see if we can straighten it. There we go. There is our block, the Peppermint Twist. When you purchase your pattern, now if you are a Quilt Lab subscriber, let me just say this because Quilt Lab is a subscription service as well. If you're a subscriber, you will have received your email with your coupon code so you can go and download your pattern set whenever you're ready. If you're not a Quilt Lab subscriber, then you can purchase our pattern sets by the month. So you might choose months, different months that you want to do those particular blocks or have those blocks in your library. So when you purchase it, you will have a full set of written instructions and you'll also have a full set of digital files. Each digital file is in a folder, and within that folder are all the different extensions for the different embroidery machines. So if you use a PES extension or an EXP or a VIP, any of the most commonly used home embroidery machines, Bernina, Brother, Baby Lock, Husqvarna Viking, Elna, Juki, Janome, all of those will be there for you. So you can just choose the one that you need. So here is the written package. And this one is pretty thick. There's a lot in this one because of that free pattern at the end. But I'll just go over it with you briefly. At the beginning of our patterns, I always try to show you what are the main segment blocks you're going to be making? So you're going to be making kind of a 4-patch. Well, it is a 4-patch, but I call it a modified. Typically a 4-patch is usually 4 blocks in 4 different colors. But this one we're using solid blocks and half square triangles. And then you're going to be making a split rail, and you're going to be making a pinwheel. That's the peppermint twist. In fact, I call this the peppermint pinwheel because that's actually what makes the twist right here in the center. So you know what's coming. Then down here, you can't see it on this copy because I haven't put the link in on my copies, but there will be a link here back to this very video. So you'll always know where to go and how to find this particular video for this particular block and project, okay? And then there is a page all about general supplies, thread, needles, scissors, stabilizer. And with Build a Quilt, we really highly recommend you use a wash away stabilizer, the same kind that you would use for freestanding lace. I know that's unusual because I know a lot of folks like to use a stabilizer or have been taught to use a stabilizer that stays in a poly mesh or cutaway, something like that. But a regular old wash away stabilizer like you use for freestanding lace is perfectly strong enough. And in the end, when you wash either your blocks or your quilt, all this washes away and you don't have any stabilizer adding bulk in your seams or into your quilt. And once you wash it away, it smooths all out. It's really quite beautiful that way. In fact, you can see here, there's nothing on that giving you any kind of problems. You can't tell how that was created. And it was all created with an embroidery machine. Alrighty, and then our next portion is a fabric creation sheet for the different segments. And so when you get this, this tells you how many to make, what color. There's a color chart for these colors, but you could plug in whatever colors you choose to use if you're not going to make it as a holiday piece. And then there is our exclusive cut sheet. Our cut sheet shows you the finished block, the finished segment piece. It gives you the colors you're going to be using, and then it will break it down into the different size blocks. So the 9x9 and the 12x12 blocks and what you need to cut for that. And I always give you generous, very generous sizes of fabric to cut for these so that when you're flipping, because this is kind of a flip and stitch idea, when you're flipping your fabric, you're never going to have to worry, oh, I've got to really pull that to try and get enough for my seam. You don't have to do that because that's the one great thing about doing quilting with your embroidery machine and doing your patchwork that way is that all of your seams and all are built into the digital file. So as long as you have enough fabric there, you're not going to have to like worry about precision and stuff like that. It's all built in for you. It's really patchwork the 21st century way, I like to say. In the 70s, 80s, and beyond, we started doing it with our machine. When I started quilting over 55 years ago, I did it all by hand with my grandma. We cut everything by hand. We sewed everything by hand. We quilted everything by hand. And I am so thankful that today we can do it with our embroidery machine. I've had to carpal tunnel on both hands, and it really helps with competitive stress injury. And I know a lot of folks that have had to give up quilting over the years like this idea because it isn't, you don't have to be as precise as your vision isn't quite as good. Maybe your hands aren't quite as strong as they were. And I know all of our younger viewers, and we have a ton of them here at Build a Quilt, they love it because it is a more modern technique. It's using a more technical piece of equipment, which is something they love. And that's great. It's still, in the end, patchwork quilting. It's as beautiful as any other method that you might use or have used in the past. Then you get our exclusive coloring sheet. The coloring sheet is for the full Peppermint Twist block. And what this is for, especially if you're not going to use these colors that I've suggested, it's a great way to take your colored pencils or your crayons and color in and see what you like, and then shop your stash for fabrics, or take that colored sheet in with you to your favorite fabric shop and purchase your fabrics based on what you've put on this sheet. And that can also help anyone at a shop helping you to find the colors that you need as well. Then there's general instructions. You get a full page diagram of it. And then at the end here are going to be some more pages, which are all about the quilt. And I'm going to save those until we come back at the end. So our next segments are going to be a little bit about talking about the fabrics, and then the demonstrations, all the way through how to sew your pieces together. And then because you don't need a 1/4 inch foot, that's the other nice thing. With a digital pattern, all of that gets built in. So if you can trace a line with your needle, you don't have to worry about your 1/4 inch feet and all of that. In fact, I highly suggest you do not try to use a 1/4 inch foot with this, because you will get off with it. Follow the lines that are in there on the back. When you stitch on the back, there are the sewing lines. Follow those and you'll get the perfect seaming every single time. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the rest of the video, and then I'll be back to talk to you about the free bonus quilt pattern, which I know you're gonna love. Okay, everybody, here is the fabric for the Peppermint Twist block that I chose, and I wanted to go over with you so you could kind of see some of the differentiation, especially between the reds. So we have a 4 patch, which is made of solid squares and half square triangles, so not your typical 4 patch, which is all squares. And these are the fabrics here. So it calls for a deep green, and I like that it had a little bit of red in it to kind of go with everything else. But this is my green. Of course, my white is that candlelit color I like. And this is the color I've chosen for the red. Now for this part, it calls for a deep red, and that is what I'm considering deep red. You could go darker if you wanted, but it does kind of go well with those colors, with that green. Now, the pinwheel in the center is, again, your white, or my candlelit color, and the deep red. And so you see that's the same red that I used for the 4 patch right there. And then we have the split rail units. It calls for, again, the white or the candlelit color and a bright red. So this is what I'm considering the bright red, and I'm going to put the dark red next to it. You can see they're not horribly different from one another. I would say technically this is a darker, this is kind of in a medium range, but you can certainly say dark and bright. This red here is much brighter than this red is here. Okay, so that's kind of the differentiation you want to see in your reds. You could go really dark and then more medium, or you could go like a medium and then even brighter. But the difference is not that this is lighter so much, but that it's brighter, kind of like the color you see in bright peppermints. So that's the difference there, and I wanted to share that with you so that when you're picking your colors, you can kind of see the difference. And that is the fabrics for Peppermint Twist. Okay, so here we are at my machine camera, and the first square or block that we're going to create is the half square triangle. Now we're going to go through and make the half square, the 1/4 square, and the square in the hoop, and then we'll go back over under my other camera and we will talk about how we trim these, because you trim all blocks in that manner. So we'll do those all at once. You can see here I have my tools available, my scissors, my glue stick, my stylus if I need it, my seam roller, and my embroidery tape. And right here I have my 2 fabrics. So I've also loaded my file on my machine. On this particular machine, I loaded it through a USB stick. You might be able to load your files through the Wi-Fi if you have a more modern machine that can do that. So somehow you have loaded your file onto your machine, and you should know how to complete that. Now today I'm going to be stitching in a black thread so that you can see it a little more easily. I have loaded my hoop with a standard wash away stabilizer, one that we would use for, say, making freestanding lace. So now I'm going to go to step 1, which is basically going to give me what I call the border outline. And you'll find that information also written in the written instructions along with the step-by-step diagrams as well. So it is just stitching out my main border. And because we are doing a square, of course, that border is a square. And what it's showing us is that this finished box is going to be our finished size. Okay. When we trim it out, we'll talk about what else this box represents for us in the piecing process. Now, a half square triangle is always 2 pieces of fabric. I've chosen this yellow and this polka dot, this aqua with the light yellow polka dot. So I have those prepared. But the second step also gets stitched directly to your stabilizer, and it will give us the placement outline for our first piece of fabric, which is going to be our lighter color or our yellow fabric. So let's do that now. Now, I will give you one tip here, because this was something that my shop where I purchased my machines and I came across. I have another machine which is a embroidery only. It's not a combo machine like this one is. And I kept having problems with it not catching stitches on my straight stitch, which is basically the only stitch we use when we're piecing. And what we found out was that it actually needed a sewing bobbin case. So in this machine, because it's a combo, I have a bobbin case for embroidery and a bobbin case for sewing. The straight stitches do better if you use the sewing bobbin case rather than the embroidery bobbin case, because really all we're doing here is straight stitching like we would on a sewing machine. If you have an embroidery only machine, but that machine has a counterpart, which is a sewing machine or a combo machine, then get that sewing bobbin and check with your local dealer for all of that information if you have problems. That can be helpful. So here I'm going to take and use my glue stick. This will show you how to use that. And I'm just going to place a couple little marks right in my upper square or triangle, really, where I'm going to place my fabric. Now I can easily see and easily feel that thread line. So I'm going to lay this fabric so that I have roughly a 1/4 inch of it hanging over or coming past that line. Not a reason to get really worried about it if it's more, because you can always trim it later. Now I place that down. Now I'm ready to stitch out step 3, which is going to be the tack down of that triangle. Oops, I'm going to stop and lift my needle and my foot because my needle came unthreaded. So we'll just rethread real quick. Just a second. Sometimes that happens with machines, right? Thank goodness for auto threaders. There we go. Now we'll start again. And we're doing the tack down of the top half of the half square triangle. Very simple. The half square triangle is probably the most often used block in quilting. And so getting used to making this block will be helpful for you, because you're going to end up making a lot of them in your quilting journey. In fact, all 3 of the blocks in our basic set today are probably the 3 most often used blocks in the series, or in the quilting series. Alrighty, so now I've tacked that down. If, excuse me, this was way over this line, I could remove my hoop and I could take my scissors and I could just give it a little trim. If it's not straight, it doesn't matter. Just do the best you can. Another good reason to have scissors with a serrated edge, because you're going to get a really fine cut there. But as of course I've used my rotary blade with the pinking blade, I'm good to go. And I am not going to trim the outer edges because that gets trimmed when we trim the whole thing out of the stabilizer at the end. So no need to trim here or here at this point. So now the next thing I'm going to do is lay down my second fabric. But I should tell you that with piecing in the hoop, your first piece of fabric is always laid down right side up. You also get that information in the written instructions. So if this piece were going to be the print, say that was my first piece, I would lay it down right side up every time, no matter what. Now, with a second, third, fourth, or subsequent piece of fabric, you always lay it down right side down or right side together with your other fabric. Now, if you can see here, I've laid this down and you'll see it in the picture diagram in the written instructions where just a tiny bit of my other fabric is showing. I like to make sure and do that. Then I know this is placed exactly where I need it to be for a good seam. Now I'm going to place that in here. I'm going to bring my needle down and my foot down, and I'm going to do the step 4, which is going to stitch this together on top of piece number 1. Alrighty. Now, piece number 5 or step number 5 is what we call the flip and stitch. So we're not done, obviously. We have to get this to be like this. So what I like to do there again is take my glue stick, give myself a little bit right in that square, and I always put my glue right on my stabilizer if possible, because then I know exactly where my boundaries are for that, and I'm not putting it out here anywhere. Now I'm going to take this bottom piece of fabric and I'm going to flip it. So easy. Now it's stuck there because of the glue. Now I can take my seam roller and I can roll my seam and give it a nice little kind of a press there to get it nice and flat. Now eventually you're going to iron these as well, but that helps for the stitch out process. Now step number 5 is to stitch this on its outer border so that it's stitched down. And we can go ahead and proceed with that. Golly, my needle came unthreaded again. Again, that's okay. That's what automatic threaders are for, to make it easy. There we go. Now we'll just go ahead and stitch out step number 5. And sometimes I just keep my fingers there to kind of help it. That's also a good time to kind of use your stylus, so not to get your fingers in there by the needle and the foot. So now technically we've stitched out our half square triangle. Congratulations, you did it if you've been sewing along with me. However, there's one more step. Step 6 will be a stitch out all the way around the block. And you might ask why. Well, a couple of reasons. One, it's going to connect these pieces that are right here at the corner between the two fabrics, or if I had multiple fabrics, it would connect them all the way around. And that box will also become our guide for trimming and our guide for sewing our squares together. You'll see that more in the trimming part of this video. So now I can, if I like, just use a stylus to hold this down here. The thing you're trying to prevent is to have your foot from catching here and flipping this back and causing problems. It's always fixable, but who wants to have to fix it if we don't need to? So you can use a stylus, or what I like to do is use my embroidery tape here. I don't put embroidery tape all the way around because it's not needed. I just put it over that point there, and then I know that that's not going to catch. Now you're going to say, oh, well, you're going to put it down there as well. I could, but because my foot is going to go around in a clockwise direction, it's not going to catch here because it's going over that fold. Here it would be coming against the fold. So you can put tape there or not. Let's go ahead and do that stitch out and I'll show you what I mean. So it's going to start up here in the corner and it's going to stitch in a clockwise direction. So I wouldn't want it to catch that. And see, it doesn't because it slides right over it because of the tape. Now, when it comes here, I don't have to worry because it's going with that fabric. It's not going to catch. Now, if it makes you a little nervous, just put a little piece of tape there until you're more confident. That's also fine. So then when we go over to trimming in a little bit, I will take this and I will peel this tape off, and then we will trim this out of the hoop. But congratulations, you just created your first half square triangle. That's how easy it is to create these squares in any size. This happens to be the 4-inch finish, but this could have been a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or any other size that you might happen to have. But in this set, we go up to 5 inches finished. So we'll talk about trimming in another part of the video. Let's move on to our quarter square triangle. Okay, so here we are at the machine and we're going to be doing the square. Now you're going to say, I know, why would we just stitch one piece down on the stabilizer and when we could just cut it and sew it? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Part of the technique of piecing in the hoop is to give quilters who have never quilted and pieced before some guidelines to help them with final sewing, and to give all of us the ability to sew our quilt together without having to have a 1/4-inch foot on our sewing machine, without having to worry about accuracy when we're doing that, but without, even though we're not worrying about accuracy because all of our seam lines and things are built in, it's actually helping us to be more consistent. And consistency in our quilting is what makes our quilts really so beautiful. You know, I like to say about quilting, you can do anything you want in quilting, and don't let someone scream at you if you have like one little point that isn't exact. Perfect is the killer of joy in quilting, I think. I don't recommend you ever trying to be perfect, but what this does is helps you to be consistent so that you get everything just as it should be, and your project will come together nicely. But you won't have to worry about, oh, is my 1/4-inch a good 1/4-inch, a scant 1/4-inch? I've been quilting for over 50 years, and this really is going to help you with all that consistency without having to worry about it. And it gives you another thing as well. It gives you a final box so that you have that stitch guide when you go to stitch your squares together. So I'll show you more of that when we do our trimming. So here we are, we're all set up for our stitch out again. Now the square really only has two pieces. We're going to do our border just like we've done before. I've done everything on this wash away stabilizer, and I will admit this one is by far the easiest and fastest. In fact, according to my machine here, at 700 stitches a minute, this is all stitched out in a minute or less, so pretty quick. Now let's speak about speed for a little bit. I always recommend that you don't piece above 700 stitches per minute. You can do your embroidery that way and all, but quilting is not about speed. And whenever we go and start to worry about speed, high speeds, that's when we end up with more mistakes, even in this process. So I say don't go above 700 stitches a minute on your machine speed. If your machine doesn't even go that high, good. That's good. Usually I do 600 to 700 stitches a minute on my machine. I put my little bit of glue there. Now I'm going to lay my square of fabric down, and I can kind of feel where my border is. Okay, it's not exactly even on all sides, but it doesn't matter. I have plenty of fabric there for trimming. Now, my second and my last piece, because I don't really have to do that basting or that stitched out border again, because it's really doing it for me now. I am just going to stitch this down. This is my final stitch step for doing my square. So now all of my squares are going to be exactly the same size. That's the consistency thing, not only with your seams, but when you cut. A lot of times, oh, we think we cut everything right. And if you've been a quilter in more traditional ways, you know what I mean when I say squaring up a square. You never have to square up when you piece in the hoop. It's really nice not to have to do that. So this one is done just like that. So our square is finished. Now we're going to go over under my other camera and we're going to talk about trimming these out, and then we'll be ready for our last little bit of our talk here on our how-to video for Build a Quilt in the Hoop Block Basics Set 1. Okay, we're back at our machine, and now we're going to create our split rail segment block. This one is so simple, but there's something a little special about this one because you can use it two different ways. So again, I've prepped my fabric, a lighter and a darker. I've got my stabilizer in, and I'm all ready here at my machine. I've got my pattern up. And the very first thing that my instructions say is stitch machine step 1 directly onto the stabilizer. So let's do that. Now, the fun thing about this particular block is you can make a single rail or a split rail, which is 2. And we'll talk about that, because you'll see that our outline here that we're stitching onto our stabilizer is just one rectangle. So if all I need is one rectangle, then I'm good. And I'll tell you when you would stop in the pattern. Now for step 2, it says place fabric A on top of space 1, stitch machine step 2, and trim roughly 1/4 inch along the bottom edge. So let's do that. I'm going to place a little bit of my glue stick here in the center just to hold my fabric down. And I'm going to start with my lighter fabric. And I just lay it across there. And you can feel your stitching, and you can see it a little bit if you use a lighter fabric, so that you know that the way you've placed it, you have at least 1/4 inch on each side. You should end up with roughly 1/2 inch on each side, so you have plenty for trimming. Now we're going to do machine step 2, and that is to stitch this down or tack it down. Now, if you only want a single rail or a single rectangle, at the end of this step, just stop, remove it from the machine, and trim it all the way around, and you'll have a rectangular piece, which is 2.5 by 5 inch finished. Okay. Okay, so let's take this out really quickly. So if I just wanted a single, I'm done now. I just take this out and I would do my trimming around the edge. However, a split rail is 2, and that's what we're going to do next. So our instructions tell us to trim along the bottom edge, not the sides or the top, because we'll trim those later. But we're going to add a second piece here, which is going to lay here and flip. So we need to trim right there. And I'm going to lay this down on my tabletop. Bring my camera down so you can see that. There we go. And again, I'm just kind of giving it a little bit of an eye to roughly be at 1/4 of an inch. There we go. Once you've gotten that down, it's pretty easy. And these Karen K. Buckley scissors that I use make it super easy because it just slides through it like butter. So here, I've trimmed that. I'm ready now. I'm going to place this back into my machine. Let's bring our camera back up. There we go. Now, our next step says place a B fabric number 2 rectangle right side down on top of fabric A as seen in the diagram in stitch machine step 3. So I've got this turned over so the right side is on top there, so it's face down. And now machine step 3 is going to tack that down, tack it together. Now, with some systems, they would have given you this box down here that was stitched onto your stabilizer as well as your overall guide for the split rail. But I didn't do that because I wanted you to have the option of doing a single or a split rail. And you really don't need it. It's extra thread there that you really don't need to worry about. So even though I don't have a box here to look at, I know that if I just put a little bit of glue right there in the center, that's going to be plenty, and that's all I need. Okay, so that's down. I pressed that with my fingers, or again, I could press it with my seam roller. Now, the next step, it says to flip fabric B into space 2, which is what we've done. Stitch machine step 4, and that's exactly where we are in the pattern. And we're going to stitch that down. And again, I just kind of, even though I've glued it, I just kind of like leave my hand there. But you can see I've backed away from it. I don't need to do that. And you don't ever want to put your fingers or your hand close to the needle and the mechanism. Okay, and then it says stitch machine step 5. That's your final guideline box. But just like we did with the flying geese unit in the last demonstration, we have a couple of connection points here, and I wish to put a little bit of tape there to hold them in place so that I don't have to worry about my machine foot snagging this fabric and flipping it up and causing a problem. There's nothing more irksome than when that happens, when you have to take everything apart and you might have not had enough fabric and then you're in trouble, and can be a real pain. So a little bit of embroidery tape helps really nicely. Now we will do step 5, which is the last step for the split rail. See how easy the split rail is? And the split rail, like the half square triangle, is really nice because half of it is one color, half of it is another. And so you can guide where your color changes are in your quilt by using something like a split rail to divide out your color. And that same thing happens except on the diagonal with your half square triangle. So this and the half square triangle, very, very useful blocks. And I love that I have the ability just to make a rectangle, and I can use any, if I'm making a single rectangle, I can use any color that I need to. So we're done now with our split rail. Again, we'll remove our tape, remove this from our hoop, and we'll do all of our trimming in a little bit. And now we're ready to move on to our diamond in a square block.
Okay, everybody, this is the layout video, and really this block is quite simple. It is our basic 3-row layout, row 1, row 2, and row 3, but there are a couple of things that I thought going over would help you. I always feel like for those folks that are real visual learners, this can be helpful. So let's just kind of walk around the block and see how the pieces are put together. So in our 4 corners, we have a basic 4 patch. Now, typically a 4 patch would be 4 solid squares, typically different colors. But let me just lay these on here. These are just some other blocks I had in that fabric. So that would be a 4 patch, although they might be different colors. That's your typical 4 patch, right? However, in this 4 patch, we have 2 solids and 2 half square triangles, or HSTs. And that's the way they're put together for all 4 of the corners. Now you have the layout diagram in your pattern, so you don't have to be writing this down, but that's going to be your 4 corners. And the very first thing you're going to want to do after you've created all of your segments and cut them out of the stabilizer is you're going to want to put together your 4 patches in your 4 corners. Then they'll match up with the sizes a little bit better, because the seam allowance will be under control at that point. And then in the 4 cardinal coordinates, north, south, east, and west, you have the split rail block. Okay, and the split rail is basically 2 rectangles put together, and it is created all together. It's not 2 that you've sewn together. This is 1 unit here that you create. However, with the split rail pattern, if you only need a single rectangle for a pattern, you can only use half of this split rail and get your rectangles that way. It's really nice to be able to do that. And with the split rails, the bright red, this is the bright red, because there are 2 reds, a dark red and a bright red. The bright red always faces inward towards our little peppermint pinwheel. That's what I'm calling this one, the peppermint pinwheel for our peppermint twist block. And it's laid out very easily. It's red, and each piece is red and white. The red goes in the upper right corner, the bottom right corner, the bottom left corner, and the upper left corner, just as if you were following that red section around the face of a clock in the clockwise direction. Okay, and then for the layout, in row 1, you have our 4 patch, our split rail, and our 4 patch. In row 2, or the center row, you have split rail, the peppermint pinwheel, or the pinwheel design, and then the split rail again. And the bottom row, or row 3, is also just like the top row. The 4 patch, the split rail, and the 4 patch. Once you get all of the 4 patches put together, now technically your pinwheel is a 4 patch as well, but it is created all with half square triangles. So that's another variation of a 4 patch. Now, once you get all those little 4 patches put together, then you're going to connect each of these 4 patches to the center split rail in row 1, the 2 split rails to the peppermint pinwheel in row 2, and the 2 4 patch corners onto the split rail in row 3. Then you're going to have your 3 rows. Then you'll attach row 1 to row 2 and row 3 to row 2. And then you'll have your finished block. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Hi everybody, so this is Diana, and I'm here at my sewing machine to show you how to sew your pieces together without getting that stitch line to show. Now you can see here I just have 2 little half square triangles. I've used the pin method up here at the point to make sure they're lined up, and I just have 1 clip here. Now what I do first is when I put this in my machine, I get my needle right to where the line would be, right on that stitch line, okay? Then I come over to my machine's tools, and I take my width down by 1, and that's all. Now I'm going to put it back up, and I'm going to take you back over to here and let you see that. Okay, so watch the needle, how that moves. I'm going to move it now. See how it just moved 1 place to the inside, or I guess as you're looking at it, it would be to the left. That would be to the inside. Now I'm going to place my needle down, and I can go ahead and remove my clip because this is a small piece, and I can sew right down And I have my stitch length at 1.8, and you can see now that I've already done a few stitches, it is still right one click in. It's not directly on top of it, and so I should, when I'm done, be able to finish and not have that black line sewn. And you just follow it all the way down. Now I'm going to cut my thread and bring it out, and I will open this up and bring it right back over so you can see it. So there it is, opened up. Now you might see a little of the black in this case because I used that marker, but when I'm just going to open up my seam in the back and hold it open for you. But you can see when I hold it open, that's just a little piece of thread that I can pull out of there. That's gone. And now you don't see it at all. You don't see any of the black thread, which I used for demonstration purposes, but you don't see any of my original embroidery thread from making the patchwork itself. And that is just by moving that needle one space and one space only. And again, I always stitch these with a 1.8 or a 2.0 stitch length so that it really holds these together when you go and open them up. And when I open it up here, you can see the line all the way down on both sides, and that's what you should be able to do. So I hope that you found that helpful. That was a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. And now we'll move on with the rest of the Q&A for today.
All right, everybody. So I hope you see how easy it can be to make the Peppermint Twist block. And now, before we finish today, I want to go over with you the free bonus pattern that you're going to receive. As I said way back in the intro, normally our blocks, our Quilt Lab blocks each month have come in 3 sizes. But this month I wanted to kind of switch it up a little bit, and I think actually you're going to like this better and get more value, because a lot of you have written to me and said, I'd really like more full quilt patterns, please. And I thought, well, all right, I'm willing to give you what you want in that respect, no problem. And so I thought, as a nice little bonus for the holiday season, I did a quilt pattern, and this quilt pattern is going to come with an extra set of digital files for you to make the sashing that goes between your blocks. Now, I did not add any border on, but you could certainly add border to this quilt if you wanted to. You could even use the sashing, just do a little bit of math to figure out how much of it you'd need to make. And you could use the sashing as a border too. It'd be super cute because the sashing is made to look like a peppermint stripe that kind of goes up and down. In fact, let's just show it to you right now. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. There we go. And here it is. This is our Peppermint Twist quilt. So you can see it's the Peppermint Twist block, but then it has this sashing, which goes in one direction and then comes up in the other direction and down and up and down and up. So every time you place this sashing next to a block, you flip it. So it starts with the red at the bottom and then it goes to the red at the top and so forth and so on. So this quilt is created to work only and specifically with the 9x9 block version of the Peppermint Twist. This block version right here. Thought the 12 was a little bit big. So the 9x9 gives you, I think, a better overall quilted look. And like I said, if you wanted to take and do a little math on your own, very easy to do. Each one of these double segments is 9 inches by 3 inches. You could figure out a border for yourself if you wanted to do a border like that. Now let's come back to the main screen here. So the Peppermint Twist quilt. Now, I want to share with you in the rest of the pattern, you're going to get a sheet on creating the sashing itself. So it's going to tell you it is created by 2 segments, a small segment and a large segment. And each here it tells you what color that is, how many to cut, and what the size is. So this is your fabric and your cut sheet. With the block, typically there is a fabric sheet and a cut sheet, but with just these 2 small segments, I was able to get everything all in one sheet for you. And so this explains the creation of that sashing piece. And like I said, you're going to take the small and the large. When you put those together, you end up creating a 3-inch wide by 9-inch long sashing piece which goes onto the side of your quilt. Let's bring our piece back up. As you can see here, it will go on the, as you look at it, it is to the right of each block, except for the very last one. There's nothing here. And so you have 4 basically columns of sashing in this. Okay. So very easy to make, very easy to do. Then the next sheet in here is the layout and instructions of the quilt. So when you break the quilt down, as you can see, there are 6 rows to this quilt. And each row is exactly the same. And down here, this shows you exactly how to lay out each one of the rows. And then over here in the instructions, it will tell you how to sew the rows together into creating the whole piece. And it will remind you right up at the top that when you're creating the rows, you want to flip your sashing 180 degrees every time you use it. So you start out with the first one with the red part at the bottom. Then you flip it the next time the red is at the top, bottom, top, just like that. And you'll follow that row by row. So you can see it in each and every row, how that sashing is placed. And once you get together, then you have that beautiful quilt. And I do think if you put the sashing all the way around it as a border, I think it would turn out super cute. Because we're getting ready for our quilt along for the end of the year, I'm not sure that I'll be able to do a whole one for this year, but I might go ahead and start mine. And then whenever I get it done, I will show it to you all, because I think that I would love to do this and have it for next year. It's a throw size or a good wall quilt size. If you want to expand it and make it larger, all you have to do is add additional rows or additional columns, and you could make this as large as you like. But as it stands now, it's about 54 by 57. So it's kind of a throw size, a good wall quilt size. And I left it like that to start because this year has all been really about the wall quilt, the nice sized wall quilt or throw quilt here at Build A Quilt. So I wanted to stay in that same vein with everyone. But you could certainly add more columns, add more rows, and make this as big as you want. So if you want to make a big, lovely Christmas quilt for a bed in your house, go ahead and do it. Go ahead. Or if you just really like the design and you want to make it for a bedroom in another color, or make it for a child's bedroom or a college student, or maybe for a grandparent who is maybe now living in assisted living and you want to give them something that just kind of will remind them of you and remind them of home and tell them how much they're loved. You could make this as a throw, make it a little longer, maybe an extra column wider, and that would give them something nice to snuggle up with. And they would for certain think of you. So those are the extra pieces that come with the pattern set. And so you get the sashing files, and those sashing files, again, go with the 9x9 block. Okay, they do not go with the 12x12 block. I just want to make sure that you understood that. All right, everybody, that is the November Quilt Lab block and bonus quilt pattern called Peppermint Twist here at Build A Quilt. If you wish to purchase your pattern, if you don't have it already, you can go to my website, www.mybuildaquilt.com, and grab it there. And it is no more expensive in price than our normal Quilt Lab. Our block sets each month, if you're not part of the Quilt Lab subscription service, are $7.95. So they're super value, very nicely priced. This whole set with the quilt and the extra sashing is still that same price. The price didn't go up because I added that. That's a bonus that you're getting with the patterns. So that is our website. If you would like to contact me, if you have any questions, about Build A Quilt and how it's done, or you need to be like sent to a video that will explain Build A Quilt in a little more detail to you, just send me an email over at support@sewincommon.com. I usually get back with you right away, at least to acknowledge that I have your email. And if I can't answer you right then, I'll tell you I'll get back with you like tomorrow morning, especially if it's in the evening, or if I am away from the studio or away from my home, I'll tell you I'm away right now. I'll get back with you by such and such a time or as soon as I can. But I try to answer you absolutely as soon as possible. Okay. I don't want your emails to go, a day, 2-3 days, and you haven't heard from me. That's not how we work here at Build a Quilt. All right, everybody, we would love to have you, if you haven't already, as part of the Build a Quilt family. And that's so easy to do, doesn't cost you anything, and you get the benefit of over 500,000 quilting friends the second you subscribe to Build a Quilt here on YouTube. Just click that little subscribe button, click the little bell, set your notifications so that you're notified when new things come out and new video content is posted. We would love to have you as part of this community. This group has grown so huge and so fast. It blows me away. But I know this, all of you are some of the kindest and most amazing people I've ever met in my life. The things you tell me and ask me about are so thoughtfully constructed in your questions and things like that. And there's no bad question ever. There is absolutely zero judgment here. We don't allow, in our live sessions and all, we don't allow any kind of negative discussions towards one another, nothing like that. We are a truly friendly quilting community. And that's what quilters really are. We're just a bunch of friendly folks that love to play with fabric. And I love to do that with all of you. So please go ahead and subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of the community. And I just want to tell you, as always, everyone, I hope you have a great week. Please don't forget that Wednesday, November 13th, we start our annual quilt along, our Quilt Lab quilt along, November 13th, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. It is our Wednesday workshop live, and that's when we're going to start the quilt along. The pattern set is available over at the website, which again is mybuildaquilt.com. But we would love to have you. If you are new to Build a Quilt and you have never done it before, over at the website, there's also a couple of free patterns. The half square triangle and the quarter square triangle, two of the most often and basic used segments in all of quilting. Go grab those. Grab yourself some stabilizer and your hoop. You only need a 5x7 hoop to use the Build a Quilt system, and sit down and give it a try. Tons of videos here for you to watch. I'm always available if you have questions. And then join us Wednesday night. Even if you're not ready to do the quilt yet, join us Wednesday night. Become part of the community. Ask your questions. Let me tell you that a lot of the folks that come on Wednesday night will help you out before I even see your questions. But I always try to get to your questions, even if somebody's already answered them. We're just that friendly. We want to make sure everyone has a good time here at Build a Quilt. So we would love to see you Wednesday night, again, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. In fact, we meet every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Central Time. So we'd love to have you anytime you're available to be with us. But until then, everybody, have a great rest of your week and go quilt life beautiful.